Amboseli is one of Kenya's flagship parks and is a UNESCO designated biosphere reserve. Amboseli itself is only 392 square kilometres, but it's part of an 8,000 square kilometre ecosystem which stretches south to Kilimanjaro and north to the slightly hilly bush area around Selenkay. It's basically a big flat plain with lakes and marshes at the west end. The lakes are fed by underground springs from Kilimanjaro, and so they are a permanent fixture. The lakes are the main water source for the big herds of zebras, buffaloes, elephants and wildebeest that all live here. Traffic's restricted to the purpose-built roads, and quite often it seems very busy, especially around interesting sightings like lions. There's a lot of different bird life here, lots of different sorts of waders and bigger ones like this marabou stork. There's loads of buffalo because there's a good all year round water source. Buffalo need the water as they have to produce up to 2 gallons of saliva a day to digest all the grass that they eat. It's the marsh area that draws the elephants in, and there are a lot of them, and a few of them have got pretty decent tusks as well. The elephants are free to roam, and the trouble is they quite often cross across the border into Tanzania. Tanzania still allows so-called trophy hunting, and unfortunately 3 of the biggest tuskers were murdered in late 2023 after crossing over. They entered a hunting block strategically placed adjacent to the border. They were promptly shot for somebody's pleasure, regardless of the effect on the gene pool or the conservation implications. Amboseli is the best place I can think of to see these bohor reedbuck because they're so used to tourists they're not spooked. But what is impressive about this park is the number and variety of waders in the marshes. Of course, there's plenty of other birds to spot, like these crowned cranes. It's said that Amboseli is the best place in the world to get up close to elephants, but my own experience is I've done better in Meru in Kenya and Ruaha and Tarangire in Tanzania. Admittedly, it's easy to get some good clear shots, but there's nothing really dramatic in the scenery once you've done that. Most of the time, Kilimanjaro's hidden behind clouds, and it does seem to be pot luck as to whether you get a decent view of it or not. There was pretty bad heat haze, and it made photography in some areas nigh on impossible. You definitely need to be out early morning before everything heats up. These giraffes look a bit lost. We saw far more giraffes in the acacia bush of the Selenkay area to the north, Selenkay being one of the dispersal areas from Amboseli. There used to be a lot more tree cover in the park, and it was thought that a lot of them were killed by elephants, but it was then discovered that a rising water table was bringing up dissolved salts into the topsoil, and it was that poisoned a lot of the trees. We visited during the worst drought in 40 years, and the land was parched. There was very little grass. There were a lot of dead animals, a lot of vultures. The rains finally appeared in late 2023 with a change in weather pattern from what's called a La Nina to an El Nino year. Since then, Kenya's been subject to massive flooding. This is an Egyptian cobra, but he didn't show us his hood. Because of the drought, a lot of the browsing animals had left the park and gone into what's called the dispersal areas, especially to the north in Selenkay, because that area is kind of bush and there was a fair bit of green on the bushes that they could eat. The zebras and the wildebeest seem to be suffering the worst because obviously they just eat grass. We saw quite a few lions either wandering about or doing very little.
Yeah, I'll come in and get you. Shut up, Chris.
Again, you can see there's loads of traffic around the lions, which reminds me of a safari park in the UK. Amboseli just does not feel like it's out in the wilds to me. Nice to see a squacko heron. That's Observation Hill in the background. When I first came here in 2005 there was nothing there, but now they've built stuff like seating areas and God knows what else up there. An occasional shower had kept some parts of Amboseli a little bit greener, but it should be a lot greener with a lot more long grass at this time of year. The drought had really taken a toll. There were a lot of dead animals about, but it was a bad time. When I came in 2005 it was admittedly a lot nicer. In this shot we've got the slopes of Kilimanjaro in the background, but you can hardly even make it out through the cloud. That's how it is most of the time. I did hope for that iconic shot of an elephant stood in front of Kilimanjaro on a beautiful sunny morning, but as usual the mountain was covered in cloud. I'm glad to report that since the rains arrived in November 2023, the park recovered really well. A lot of the greener areas seem to be located near the marshes, so it's a really good job that those marshes are stream fed from underground. I don't often see secretary birds flying. We were lucky to find this family of cheetahs, a mum and 4 cubs, sheltering under a bush from the heat of the day. They were quite close to the road, and for once there was nobody else about. I'm told there's only about 8,000 cheetahs left in the wild. There were quite a few gazelles about, like this male Grant's gazelle, and a lot of Thompson's gazelles out on the plains. The Thompson's gazelles do seem to be able to deal with arid conditions much better. Overall, I was a bit disappointed with Amboseli. The scenery is a bit flat and boring, unless you can see Kilimanjaro. It's very busy. It just doesn't have that out in the wild feeling to me. Even the wildlife seemed a bit less than spectacular. Amboseli appears to be overrated, and there's definitely much better parks to visit in Kenya.